All right, how you guys doing? Pretty good. I'm gonna sit down immediately, so there you go. All right, I'm gonna bring in the rest of my team here, and in no particular order, because I can't see them at all right now. So we got Grant, Shaun, and Jameson.
Oh, I can't see anybody.
Yeah.
That's nobody's there.
Yeah, don't even worry about
I
it.
can see these three people.
How we doing? Good?
Good. Okay, all right. Did you guys see the earlier session? I'm sure. We had a bunch of these guys in there. Okay. All right, so today's panel is on leadership in game development. And I'm going to start this off by allowing each panelist to introduce themselves completely and give a little background, my style, where you have a few extra minutes. This is how I did it earlier, Shaun, so you missed this. And in particular, related to your leadership roles in game development. All right? All right. Cool. Start off with Jameson.
All right. I'm Jameson Durall. I'm a game design and development grad from 2001. Worked at Oddworld on Stranger's Wrath, at EA on the Godfather games and the Simpsons game. Spent 8 years at Volition on Saints Row and Red Faction. And now I'm working with this guy at Insomniac on Spider-Man 2. So across the time, it was kind of building leadership positions to where, focusing on the level side, then moving into lead level designer, to eventually design director. But the truth is that doesn't matter so much. Leadership is in every position that you're in, and it's all about, and a lot of times it's about just leading by example, and I'm sure we're going to talk quite a bit about that.
And I'm Shaun, head of technology at Insomniac Games. I'm also a 2001 graduate, 2 months behind this fine gentleman here. I have been at Insomniac Games for about 20 years now, nearly 20 years this December. I started my career there as an engine programmer, but then in 2007 I transitioned into leadership. So I've been in leadership for about 16 years, starting as a lead programmer, now as head of technology. And as head of technology, I lead the engineering, technical art, IT, and UI/UX teams. It's about 105 folks now. So it is really, my job is to support a gigantic group of exceptionally talented people and help them make great games like the one that this fine gentleman is working on, Spider-Man 2.
Wow, I'm not working on Spider-Man 2, and I work with neither of them, so I just want to get that out of the way. I'm Grant Shonkwiler. I'm a 2008 grad from Game Design and Development, so many moons after these two. Thank you for paving the way, gentlemen. And I have been in leadership roles essentially my entire career. At first, not on purpose, just because there was a void. Then eventually by title, be it lead designer, producer, lead producer, senior producer, executive producer, different things like that. And so for the last 5 years, I've been a leadership coach. So I've been working with leads of all levels. So starting at your first leadership position up to executives, companies as small as 10 people, as big as 200. And so I love talking about leadership and excited to chat about this.
All right. Okay, so here's the first question for you guys. And I'm going to say the question, but I'm going to add a little caveat, which is, how has your leadership style evolved over the years? But I want to drag it all the way back to your time at Full Sail, in case there was a time that you were on campus then and you had a leadership role. So that may not have happened, but if it did, think about that as well, and then bring it all the way to today. And we don't have to go in order, so whoever wants to jump in first.
I mean, that's a big question,
yeah,
right?
It's a long story for sure.
Yeah. I mean, thinking back to my time at Full Sail, that's where I first learned that as a designer, you kind of end up being a de facto leader, right? You end up generally kind of shepherding the design. Here's what we're going to make. Here's what it's going to take. Here's how we're going to work together to accomplish this. And so it's something you kind of had to learn to do right away. And over the course of, the career, there was a whole lot of, I'm a collaborative person, I'm a communicator. So for me, it's a whole lot of like empathy and thinking about what the other people need to do their part of the work that we're trying to accomplish. And so there's a whole lot of like leadership comes in almost accidentally at times when you're just trying to facilitate and help something, to get to where it needs to be and enabling the others around you to help do that.
I think the biggest change that I've seen over the last 16 years is you could measure it on two continuum. I've gone from being highly reactive as a leader to highly proactive, and I have gone from being highly directive to highly supportive. Some of it is just the nature of teams expanding. You know, when you have 3 people that you're leading, you can do a lot of stuff. When you have a larger team and then you have management layers, and it becomes different. But I think a lot of it was just me learning and quite frankly, like growing as a human being. Like when I started as a leader, I was 29 years old. I'm 45 now. Just learned a lot. I'm a dad. I have kids, and my life is really different, and it taught me a lot of things and adjusted my style. Because what I really have gotten to at this point is the stuff that makes me really satisfied and happy isn't like Shaun figured out the problem. It is more like Shaun has a team of amazing people that can solve amazing problems. That actually brings a lot of satisfaction to me. And golly, it takes a real long time to get there. But I feel a heck of a lot more effective than I did even when I had my first team, which was just 2 people.
Wow. Yeah. I led teams before I came here, and then while I was here, any opportunity for project lead I took. Most people didn't want to do that anyways. They just wanted to write code. So I would put my hand up and volunteer. And I knew pretty early that that's what I wanted to do, was be a leader in the game industry. I didn't know what that looked like, if that was as a programmer, a designer, a producer, whatever that was going to be. And so quickly at my first job, I was leading from what I call the second chair, which means I didn't have a title. I didn't have any official power or, authority to do anything. But by my actions and by the way that I communicated with the team, I was leading us in a specific direction as an organization, and eventually moved into a more official capacity as a leader. How I've changed is, for those of you who have heard me talk this week, I talk about this a lot. I'm a recovering narcissist, and so at the beginning of my leadership career, I was always right, and I would often tell people that they were not as smart as me. And so I had to learn that that's not useful, it's not helpful, it's not healthy. So I've changed away from that, very similar to you, more proactive than reactive. And then also moving into more of a position, obviously as a leadership coach, but even before that, of building up other leaders, right? So being comfortable understanding that a big part of my job is to build you up to a level where you could do my job, right? And early on in my career, as part of that narcissism, I thought, well, none of these people can do my job, right? So like you said, you grow as a human. You become more patient. I think having a kid makes you more patient, as all 3 of us can attest to. And so, yeah, it is part of the natural cycle, both as a human being, but also as a leader to evolve and to kind of mellow. I'm also way less intense than I used to be as an individual. So
That is true.
Yeah, I used to be full on.
Now, you say you're way less intense, so let's talk about that for a second. So you mentioned having kids, but what do you think? What made you less, like just having more confidence, or just having more behind you to rely on? Has it become more of an intuition? You know, does it feel like you're facing less unknowns? What makes you feel less intense as a leader?
I think you learn over time that there's a certain economy of action that you can take as a person, and that there's a lot of power and efficiency in not doing things. And I think that you find yourself being far more tactical about where you apply your effort. And the analogy I use, which really lands like a lead balloon with groups of game developers, but I use a football analogy because we all love these. Does anybody know what a reverse is in football? I love it. I'm gonna let the analogy go out anyhow. But basically, a reverse, you're gonna run, like a wide receiver is gonna go in motion down here and run all the way behind the quarterback, get the handoff from the quarterback, and then come around. The whole thing you're trying to do is to get the defense to bite on a play over here, so there's a lot of room on the other side. The thing is with a reverse, it's the most obnoxious and hated play in football, because a lot of the times people get tackled behind the line of scrimmage, or they get like 2 yards. So they get 2 yards, and what we want is positive yards. But the thing is, they run about 40 yards to get 2 positive yards. I feel like early in my career, I ran a reverse every play.
Yeah, love that.
I was always in motion. Over time, what you learn, again, I'm going to stick with the football analogy. What you learn is that you can read the gaps. It's like running a zone read offense. You can read the gaps, make quick decisions, and pick up quick wins that way. And I just find myself to be 1,000 times more efficient, and part of that is just not being in this perpetual frenzy.
Yeah.
Like Jameson's known me for I was an intense human being too. I'm not less. I don't think that I'm a less intense human being. I just think I understand how to channel that intensity in different ways.
Yeah. I think for me, and this is going to be a very maybe I don't even know, controversial or just like
a hot take,
a dark statement, but like what we do doesn't matter in the grand cosmos. And I think when I started to realize that like there's so much more in the world to be concerned about, worried about, upset about, frustrated about, then my intensity towards games became, hey, this is like a super cool job. It's super fun to do. The people that I work with are really passionate about this. And me coming in at them at 100 miles per hour when they are also mentally weighed down by the climate or pandemics or all this other stuff is just not effective, right? You can lead in a style that is excited, right? You can be excited and people are excited by that. But by intensity, I mean going up to somebody and being like, why are we doing this way? Why did you do this way? Why aren't we done with this? You know, like just coming in at 100, not just in an angry way or a questioning way, but just because I need stuff to get done. And that is just not how I lead now. Now I'm very much, like you said, supportive kind of person. And so my intensity is channeled into kind of other things.
Yeah, the big thing for me is experience over time, you know, kind of guides how quickly you solve problems and the way that you solve them. And because a lot of times what I think about is we'll be in a meeting and people will be talking through a particular problem, and I'm sitting and listening for what is it that your discipline cares about here? What is it that the concerns are? And in the back of my head the whole time I'm thinking I've solved this problem before. Right? like I know a solution to this problem, right? But instead of jumping out right away and giving that solution, I have to now listen to the problem here because it's a different group of people. It's a different set of tools. So there's this combination of like, when do you come out with here's a potential solution, and when do you kind of weigh and make sure that you have all the information, and that knowing that and kind of gathering all that as you're thinking through everything is something I couldn't have done 20 years ago, even a little bit, right? And it helps me make better decisions quicker. And allows, you know, at times it's a good opportunity to mentor someone in this situation. Be like, hey, I see why that's bothering you. Let me talk to you about a time that we went through that and we solved it this way. Maybe that would help here.
Yeah. A leader is a communicator and an educator. And I think that when you think about education and teaching someone something, be it through mentorship or action or sitting back and letting them fail or letting them walk through that understanding, right? If you jump in and you offer them an answer, that's the answer forever, and they have no understanding of how they got to that answer, right? And so that's another level of intensity that you pull back on is like people need to go through the path of self-discovery sometimes, right? And so where I would just answer questions and be like, no, it's this, go do that. And they're like, how did you arrive at that? Like, what are we, and I'm like, I don't have time for that, go for that. Whereas now, I just kind of sit back and I watch people fumble through stuff and maybe poke in the right direction every once in a while if I think the cost is going to be too high. But that learning through, you know, the journey of failure or whatever it is, as a leader, again, an educator, is so valuable. It's so important.
There's a nuance that occurs to me on this when we talk about being a supportive leader. And then we talk about this idea of intensity. Part of being supportive is making the call and communicating and being confident in it. So the kind of leader that I am today, it isn't like, I don't want it to sound like some yoga babble thing. I'm not a guru. It's my job. It is my job to make amazing tech for games. And it is my responsibility when we screw up. And it's my responsibility to make those decisions. A lot of the time, and I am very fortunate to have built a team of outstanding advisors, and I would say 9 times out of 10, a win to me is that I say, hey, what do you all think? And then somebody says, we should do this. And I'm like, we cool? Okay, we're doing this. What's next? And so the reason why I say that is I don't want you all to think that you disengage. It's just that your style adapts a little bit. Does that make sense? There's sometimes when I hear people talk about leadership in this way that makes it sound very like, I don't know, like you're a spiritual advisor. And It's not really like that. At the end of the day, your job, the most important thing that you're responsible for as a leader are results. That's why I'm head of technology, because Ted Price is the president of Insomniac, expects certain things from technology for our games. And it still is a job, but at the same time, you find that there are more effective ways and, quite frankly, more efficient ways to arrive, at that direction. Like you have to make decisions all the time. It's the same thing.
Yeah, and sometimes those decisions are micro and sometimes they're macro. Right? And so sometimes they're affecting the whole studio. I was coaching a lead designer, and he said, I said, what's your biggest problem with being a lead? He said, I have to make all the decisions. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, I have to come up with all the solutions. I said, no,
that's
not your job.
Those are two.
Right?
Making the decision is very different than coming up with the solution.
Yeah, and that's what I was asking him, is because I knew what he actually meant was he was trying to come up with all the solutions. And I said, you have 6 designers on your team. Don't they have solutions? Don't they have levels of expertise that are different than yours? Yeah. So can't they come up with solutions, and your job is to make the decisions? And decision is, everybody talks about it and you say, yep, that's what we're doing. And he's like, that's what I'm supposed to be doing? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, oh man, that sounds way easier.
Well, how many people here like being told what to do? Oh, wait, we can't.
Oh, come on. Some of you do.
I'm going to assume that there are no hands.
There's a couple over here.
That's what I'm saying. It's kind of cool making some calls and being part of the discussion. You kind of learn that as a leader, and it has the added benefit of like less work for me.
Yeah.
Because we're spreading around a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm still a pretty intense dude. I think it's just different.
Yeah. Well, you channel your intensity.
You're still an intense dude, but it's different. I understand exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Jameson's always been
mellow as.
I don't think you're. I think that you're just very. I think that you're very patient. You're a very good listener.
Compliment time for Jameson.
Yeah.
I like.
Intense. I think it takes a certain amount of intensity to. Speaking of which, like this guy, you're still at it. I love it. I come back like every year, and we get older and older, and you're still like
intensity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm gonna dig into this question from kind of like the side here. So I'm hearing a lot of similarities between you guys, and I'm wondering if this isn't a little generational. So what I want to say is, now think of the question, but frame it in terms of the game industry in general and its evolution. Because, you guys changed, but, did where you work change? Was the work changing, right? So, like, it may have been, I don't want to take away anything you guys did in terms of improving yourselves, but I feel like, you were in the place at the time. Certainly those earlier days, anywhere you went, they would have expected a certain intensity that's not necessarily the same now, right? This is like a quality of life thing that's been going on in the industry forever. And I'm wondering, like, do you think if we had a bunch of different, if we had Nolan up here from Atari, what would he say about that?
Point.
What do you think? Do you think you guys are at good companies where you've managed to do that, or is the whole industry kind of improving, or is it just up and down? I mean, progress isn't linear, but...
I think the industry is improving.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of that improvement is people coming in and saying, you're not going to fuck me. Right? Like, I'm serious. Like, people come in and they say...
You mean the employees, employees that are coming in? Yeah.
Students are coming into the industry and they're saying, I believe in workers' rights. I'm going to come in, you're going to pay me my bread, and I'm going to, go live my life. Right? And that is definitely not what it was when I joined, right? When I joined, it was you clock in and there's no clocking out. Right, you're 24/7 game dev on this project, and you might work 90 hours in a week, you might work 40 hours in a week. And I quickly arrived at my own journey where I have a chronic health issue, and I cannot work like that. And I finally said, I can't do this anymore, and I'm not going to make my teams do it anymore. And here's how I'm going to mitigate that problem, and here are the ways that we're going to go through this conversation. And if I had tried to have that conversation 15 years ago, I would have been fired. And I had that conversation 10 years later, and people were like, yeah. And now people come to me to help solve this problem. And they spend a lot of money on me to solve this problem. And I don't provide any value to the game itself, right? I am not making art. I'm not making code. I'm not doing anything. I am coaching leaders to be better human beings towards other human beings. And so I think, and I have a lot of business, right? So that to me is an indication that the industry is changing because they're willing to spend money to improve the individuals who are taking care of the individuals on their team. I want to be very clear. I do think that a big part of that is younger generations coming in and having that passion still, but also understanding that like there's more to life, right?
I think in addition to the generational component, there's an economic component. I can't decide which one is more prominent, but
Sure.
as the industry has expanded, we need more people to come in to make these games. And I don't believe that we've ever lived in a supply economy in games. I don't ever remember one. I believe that we are perpetually, talent is always in demand. And essentially what that means, when talent is demand, it means that people make more money and people will go to the companies that work the way that they want to work. So what I'm saying, there's always a limit to how much you can pay people. The thing that we can do is we can invest a lot in providing the flexibility so you can balance work and life the way that you want. Big reason why we do that, though, is economics, because we need to hire people, because we cannot hire enough people to make the game, to meet player and consumer demand. And I think that forcing function has been, I do think that there are like cultural components that have shifted over the generations, but I cannot underscore the fact that, 22 years, like we've been at this for 22 years, I've never reached a point when you're like, oh, it's so easy to hire somebody. Never.
True.
It's never easy. And I work for a reputable company with a great reputation, a very strong brand. It is very hard to hire people still.
So it's almost like a little bit of culture, a little bit of generation, and also capitalism.
Yeah.
I mean, all of that is true, right? Like the industry is clearly evolving and getting better, and we're putting more of an emphasis on work-life balance and those things. But when you're thinking about like just pure leadership, I don't think that's changed very much, right? Like I think the tactics that work and the things that we try to do to be better leaders remain the same, because what really matters is how you're interacting with people, right? And that you're providing people with what they need to do the job that they want to do as in the most efficient way possible. And each person is going to develop their own style, right? And your experiences through the industry are definitely going to impact that. But there are some clear kind of like techniques you can follow that allows you to kind of like get the right foots in place so that you have the right foundation for that you're trying to build.
See, I would agree with you 100% that the leadership hasn't changed because it's still really bad.
Yeah, that's true.
The
too.
majority of leadership in the game industry, and I know what your reaction is, but let me be clear here. The majority of leadership in the game industry is bad because they don't know what they're doing, right? You are a craftsperson, right? I am a great game programmer. I'm crushing it as a game programmer. I love what I do. It's so great. I'm the most experienced person. Someone comes over and says, you're the lead game programmer, and then they walk away. And you're like, I don't know what that means. And maybe they'll give you like a John Maxwell book and be like, go read this. And you're like, okay. And you read the book and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? And so the big change that feel like I've been a part of in the industry is understanding that leadership is craft as much as programming, art, whatever that is. Yeah. And my biggest contribution, I think, to the game industry will be that I convinced the Game Developers Conference to stop calling it production and management and start calling it production and leadership, because that is a completely different thing than management, right? We're not going to talk about management or what the differences are, but leaders need to have an understanding that, like, if this is 20 to 50% of your job, you need to be trained. You need to learn, right? You don't have to hire me, but there's all these resources online in different places that you can learn. And, I think that has not changed. I still see the same leadership issues happening that were happening 15 years ago.
It's a skill.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I was just say, it's like when you're brought in at the bottom, you're really focused on technical ability.
Yeah.
You have specific instructions to execute. And this is really true, and almost like the model for gaming fits a lot of software in general.
Correct.
So you have these great teams who have super in-depth knowledge, and then you say, well, someone has to lead this team, and it's one of you guys. And maybe at the lowest group, you might find someone who's got a natural propensity for it. But the higher you go, you start to go, man, I haven't written a really hardcore piece of code in years now, and that was what I used to do, but now I just manage people, which is a completely different job. You're in the same space, but the different job. So it does happen in other places. But, and to a lot of failure, levels of failures and success in different companies, if they don't acknowledge, maybe we need to have leadership training versus just expecting it to happen.
I mean, natural leaders tend to be, what is the biggest the thing that we identify in natural leaders? Anybody have any guesses? No. No, they do have something. They're male.
Yeah.
Second thing, what else do they have? They're Caucasian. Number 3, tall. You're right. Number 4, they're loud. Natural leaders are nonsense brokers. Leadership is a skill that you learn over time. I happen to be Caucasian, male, and loud. I'm not tall, but I got 3 of 4. People used to say, "Oh yeah, Shaun, you're a natural leader." I was loud, white, and male. It took me a long time to learn, like Grant is saying, this is what leadership actually is. And so I will never, ever not take the opportunity to dispel the myth about natural leadership. What they're really talking about is the way things have worked in the Western Hemisphere for the last 10,000 years. It's not it's not entirely true. There are these things that you learn over time. Same as programming, same as design, same as art, same as anything else. You learn things over time when you devote yourself to it. It's just a really important thing. I hate the natural leader thing.
How many people here? I love that, by the way. How many people here have had a bad boss, like just a bad boss? How many of you keep your hands up? Keep your hands up. How many of you have? That's the only boss you've ever had, right? So here's the thing about being a leader. You can put your hands down. We learn leadership by the observation of other leaders, right? And it starts with our parents. Those are our first leaders. Maybe we have coaches. Maybe we have bosses. And part of what I do when I start to coach someone is I make them go through their leadership history. And the thing that we learn is we learn by observation. And so if you've only had that bad boss, that's the only way you know how to be, right? And so how do you break out of that? You can read some books, but that doesn't really work super well. You need a good boss to show you how to be a good boss and to come alongside you and show you how to be a good leader, right? And so that's why I've seen it be such a huge lack in the game industry, is because a lot of people that are in leadership positions now came from following the leaders who were the leaders in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and early 90s of the game industry, and they came from people who were bad leaders too. So until we break that cycle of leaders learning from bad leaders, you don't go into a position of good leader. Ted is great.
Yeah, Ted.
Ted is one of, in my opinion, I mean, he speaks about leadership a lot. He has his podcast.
Yes.
He is a great leader.
I have had the privilege of being close to one of the greatest.
Yeah.
I think Gary Jones is great, and we have the privilege of getting to spend
Very
time with him,
great.
So
Yeah.
One of the things you're talking about, I don't even think you just want one good boss. I think you want to study 100 good
Correct.
bosses,
Yeah.
because, and this is a really nuanced thing, but I want to try to get you to wrap your brains around it. The most effective leader that you will be is based on who you are. There's an important authenticity component. And so you might look and say, "Oh man, I really, really like this person. I want to be like them." Well, it isn't acting, and so it's really nice to not just having a good boss. And what Grant is saying is 100% true. You want to have you want to have exposure to as many leaders as possible, so you can start crafting a profile that sits on top of who you are. It's really hard to change who you are, really hard, unless you're an actor, in which you don't need to be a leader because you're making a shitload of money. Like Meryl Streep doesn't need to do this stuff because she can become different people. The rest of us. It's harder. What was the question?
No.
Have to do that in every single one, right?
All right, so I'm gonna change it up a little bit. We're gonna do some horror stories, because that's always fun to listen to. So tell me, you can kind of think of this different ways. Think about it. It could be a project that you were leading that went wrong and how you dealt with it, or like where you had to make a really tough decision as a leader and how you dealt with it. And probably the more, train wrecky, the better. Like the more horrible it is.
I mean, the one that comes to mind, I won't say the project, but it was the first project that I directed. And I was so determined to make all the calls myself to the point where somebody that came down, we need to review our cinematics, like our work in progress cinematics, and write notes on them. And I'm directing this, I need to do this. And I remember somebody sat me down and they're like, "I want to help you." And I was like, no, it's my job. I need to do it. And they're like, they didn't say you're being an idiot. They were very diplomatic, but they basically said, please let me help you. Please let me help you. And it was, I mean, this is in like, what, 2012 or something? It was really hard for me to do. And the person that was offering their help is one of the best people I know at this. Like, I really was tied up in this conception that for this to be my baby, I needed to get good at doing this. Yeah. I was doing 9,000 other things. I was directing for the first time. I was probably a disaster at it. But what it taught me later is, like, humble pie is actually pretty nourishing. It is pretty nourishing because the alternative is a shit sandwich of your own making.
All right, that's your Twitter quote right there.
Love it.
I'm trying to think back of a specific moment, and the thing that keeps coming back to my mind is a time where I was involved in bad leadership that this time wasn't my fault. I'm sure I've had plenty that were. But I was at a small company early in my career, and the solution to fixing the problem that we were behind on something was mandatory crunch. And it was 12 hours a day, sign in, sign out, 6 days a week, and 8 hours on Sunday. And I did that for 3 months. And there's plenty of research that shows how ineffective that actually is and actually causes things to be less effective overall. But it was just a mandated, like, this is what we're doing. There was no consideration for anything else other than, and there was a time where during that, where I had to share a dev kit with someone and we could not work at the same time. So one of us just had to sit there because there was literally nothing else we could do at the time. So, and so that was like a very frustrating experience on top of all this time. And we were all working so much that a bunch of us got super sick because we were just exhausting ourselves. And now we've lost a decent amount of the studio, right? And so now we're even further behind than we were before. And it's just like there was no thought put into what really needed to happen, which was how do we enable our people to do their job better instead of just saying, just be here because your being here is what's going to work. And that's absolutely not the case.
And that company was? No, I'm kidding.
I have.
I meant to say that earlier, not to mention any company.
No, wait. I'm going to ask him later, though.
I have more train wreck stories than success stories, it feels like. And some of them are mine.
Notice I answered first because it was like, that's easy.
Yeah, some of them are mine and some of them are others. And I think that one of the ones that really comes to my mind is I was working on a project and the project was being rebooted. And the guy who took over as director, just like you, first-time director, said, I got to do it all. I'm going to do it all. And I remember talking to him and saying, but that doesn't make sense. You've been making games for 20 years. When have you done it all? And he's like, no, I'm the director. I have to do it all. And so I, as a producer, had to go tell 200 people to sit at their desks for 3 months and do nothing. I read all of Kama Sutra. I think I watched a lot of YouTube. And I learned how to be a better game developer. But you can't tell game devs to stop making games, so they just kept making their own game. And then eventually that guy got fired, and the game that we were all secretly making became the game.
Wow.
So, it was one of those things where I kind of went around to people, and I was like, don't work. Don't work. If you guys want to, like, go form your own little group, do that, but don't work. And that's just that doesn't make any sense to me as a leadership thing.
I was just thinking that doesn't sound like a train wreck. It sounds like you led that team to success.
Maybe I did, but I wanted to point out the other guy.
It was like a humble brag, man.
Yeah, a little bit. I wasn't the only one. It was just I was just a humble producer. But I think what's really interesting about that story is like that people want to do work and they want to do meaningful work, right? And so part of our job is to enable them to feel that. And so asking a team to stop working, even if the work they're doing is pointless, you can go say, go learn new things or, start playing around with art style or do these other things. But I think it goes straight back to what you're saying that like being a leader doesn't mean you have to do everything. Being a director doesn't mean you direct everything, right? We're not really an auteur-based industry. And unless you're working in Japan, some of those studios are very, authoritarian, I guess, in the way that they are run, where one guy kind of says, this is everything that we're doing. But that's not any game I've ever worked on. Everything I've ever worked on is entirely collaborative process. Someone said on my GDC panel this year, they said game devs are a miracle of human endeavor. And I thought that was a really cool way to say it, because it ultimately comes down to, our collaboration, our ability to, work together.
At our best, we're doing something that only humans can do. It is something that is irreplaceable. It is what humans are designed to do, is to be force multipliers and be non-linearly smarter. The sum is greater than the parts. Is that the thing I'm trying to get to?
Yep.
Yeah, like
you got there.
We are able to achieve that, and that is where like the most beautiful things come from. Getting those wins and creating the conditions for them is unbelievably hard, and thank goodness we're not great at it, or folks like me wouldn't have jobs. folks like Grant wouldn't have people to coach because the stuff would just work. But there's so much truth in what you just said. Is like that the special sauce doesn't come from one person. It comes from 5 people. It comes from 10 people. It comes from groups of people. And I don't know why that's not intuitive. We all have this conception of ourselves of like the person that solves the problem, whether that is making sure that our cinematics look good or making sure that our code is performant. But a lot of the time, the best results really do come from many. Like I remember, and Shaun probably, I don't know if Shaun remembers because you've had so many students, but like the amount of time I would bang my head against a problem, and then I would eventually like go to Shaun and be like, dude, how do you do this? And he'd be like, oh yeah, just like this. And I would be like, maybe next time I should ask him. And then I would go back to my same old routine.
And then you go back to it,
Just because every time that you help me out with something, I learn something, and you didn't tell me how to solve it. You helped me learn how to solve it.
So if you're coming from a programmer background, your experience is like this constant fight with your code. There's like this battle, and then there's like this win, right? And there's like a high from the win. But moreover, you're used to this idea of like, I can break this rock if I hit it from every angle. And there is like, just like any kind of craft, there's like a pride in the labor that I think some people don't want to let go of. This is actually one of the things that I see is that when someone's trying to go to their first management tier, they run up against this a lot.
Yeah.
Because the pride they got in their life was from the work that they're no longer doing. And it's a kind of a shock to them. But it's a perception thing that you can go like, yeah, I can have that and it can be real, but also I can do these other ways as well.
There's one of our leads, one of our engine leads. I have quarterly one-on-ones with all the leaders on the team, which is about, I think it's 20 people for the different departments. And I was talking to one of the engine leads. There's been something he's been working on for 2 years. His team's been working on for 2 years. He cannot let go of it. And I actually had the talk where I was like, hey, would it make some sense to let go of this? I feel like we might be falling into a sunk cost position. And I just talked it through, and I could tell. And this is somebody who's been making games for 15, 20 years. Like this is a great human being that understands it so utterly hard. And what I ultimately said to him, I said, dude, if you do this, people aren't going to think, oh, you're the person that couldn't solve the problem. Like this is a gangster move. Killing your baby that is freaking leadership. We will find another solution, but even he got stuck in it. I'm saying that like all of us can get stuck in this position. It's that same thing. I don't know what is wrong with it. And it's really nice to have people from the outside that can shake you out. If you find and build those relationships, somebody that can just say, yo, you have to take a different direction here.
All right. We are at our question Q&A time. Do you have some online as well? Okay, so we got questions in here, and do we have somebody with the mic that can hand it to them, or maybe not? I can. All right, I got a lot of hands that went up, and I think saw this one first. So go ahead and speak up nice and loud. Okay. Yeah, are they going to come around? No. Yeah. Okay. All right, they'll come around. Do I still? Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead and say it. You're close enough. Say it nice and loud.
How do you deal with directing someone in something you have no idea about?
Well, hopefully you're not directing in something you have no idea about, right? Like ultimately you should be in a position where the things and people that you're directing are generally in your field of knowledge, but you will find individual problems that you've never solved before, right? And I think For me, leadership is all about facilitating and enabling the people to do the thing they need to do, right? So I would gather a group of people that are experts on this thing and immediately have a conversation about what don't I know, right? Like, how do I get up to speed on whatever the potential solutions to this problem are, and lean on the people that are the experts, because that's what they're there for.
I mean, asking really good questions and being a good student. One of the interesting things about my role is the portfolio of responsibility of my team is so vast at this point that I am an expert in nothing. But I know a lot of that upper layer, because what I ultimately need to do is think about how things fit together. And so similarly with the director, you don't need to be an expert animator or an expert cinematographer or understand like scene composition and editing. You don't have to be an expert in any of those things, but you need to understand how all the pieces fit. And honestly, the easiest way to do that, which Jameson just said, is go find an expert. Sit down. I mean, I did that when I was working with some animators on something. I said, like, why is this important to you? What are you trying to do here? Like, what is the goal? And he actually went in and he showed me, and he drew some like 2D. Like, this all came from 2D. What he was trying to explain, like breaking a silhouette. And then you learn a couple things about it. And realistically, from a leaders need to be pretty well versed in the thing that they're leading. They don't need to be experts, I don't think. And you become a quick study. Like, for example, like there are people on my team. I'm trying to think of like our network. We have like network engineers in IT. I know barely anything about networking, but I'll tell you, I know a lot more than I did, 4 or 5 years ago, because I've asked them a lot of questions. Anytime something comes up, I'm like, is this the DNS? Is this a subnet problem? And I've actually learned about, like, I don't mean net, I mean like IT network engineering. And so I've learned about that. Find those people, ask good questions. You become a quick study, because again, you only need to understand how the pieces fit together. You don't actually have to understand how to do that individual piece.
I want to point out a phrase he said under his breath was to ask the question, why is this important to you? And I think that's not totally applicable to your question, but that's a super great leadership way of thinking, for sure.
I just tell people I'm dumb and they need to explain it to me.
Yeah,
I don't know anything about what you're doing.
I do that.
Can you explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old? I say that all the time.
I do. Like, I'll just say, somebody will start saying something and I'll like slack them, Eli 5. And then they do that. By the way, that's also useful, because in my role, I need to talk to a lot of non-technical people and explain things to them. And so it kind of helps in both ways.
All right, we got the mic all the way in the back right now.
So, considering large projects and deadlines, how do you make a balance between pressuring too much and not pressuring enough your team?
I love this question. I went through this exact thing with a AAA team a couple months ago, and pressure is an interesting way to say it, but I like to say that our goal is to put a sense of urgency in the way that people work. So it's not so much pressure. We want to explain to them why. Like, why is this a big deal? That's the first thing. Okay, so we have a milestone coming up, and if we don't hit the milestone, we're going to lose funding from our publisher, right? So now they understand why. How are we going to go about doing that? We're going to go about doing it this way. What are we going to be doing differently than we've been doing before? And we analyze what that is. And then they now are on board. They have the journey, and then we just give them that sense of urgency, right? I act a little bit urgent, but pressure and urgency are different, because pressure is like me coming up and saying, Shaun, are you done with that thing yet? And urgency is like, hey man, I just want to make sure you have everything you need, right? And
yeah, you even talked fast.
Right.
That was an urgent demeanor, and you asked the same question in a different way.
I've been doing this for a while, right?
No, everything he's saying is like very right on here.
Yeah,
but yeah.
So that's really key, right? And when you're putting pressure on people, they have a tendency to fight or flight happens, right? And so they're like, ah. That's the sound that they make. When you're putting a little bit of urgency on people and supporting them through that, it actually builds like this team, like Ultron, just like forms, and everybody's like, yeah, here we go, right? And so, that's how I usually go about doing it.
There's a certain like solidarity in these challenging situations, and Steve Jobs was kind of a master of that. He was somebody said that he was really, really good at casting any kind of endeavor into an us versus them.
Yep.
It's Macintosh, and then it's the evil empire of IBM, going back to that 1984 ad. And so there is a certain thing where you getting up in front of the team and saying, we have an amazing opportunity ahead of us.
Yep.
There is a lot of work between now and then, but my gosh, what we're going to do when we're done with this is going to blow people's minds. And I believe in you, and I'm happy to be doing this thing with you. Let's go do this. So, right, I've had to do it. Like we both had to do this a couple times. But really, what I'm saying is, I didn't tell anybody it was going to be okay. I didn't tell anybody that it wasn't going to be hard work. Yep. But what I did is, you weave a narrative. You know, like giant slaying is really compelling. You know, the David versus Goliath is very compelling to people, and so it's a pretty powerful opportunity as a leader to cast it as this like broader, you know, epic struggle.
Love that.
I mean, if you are the person who believes in the urgency, so you're the manager and you totally believe it, you can, like, first you said it almost was like just tell them the real situation was one tactic. The Steve Jobs reference reminded me of one that he told. This is a little manipulative, but it's because he believed it. It was like one of the earliest ones. It's one of the earliest Macs that took too long to boot. I'm sure you guys have heard this story. So it's like takes too long to boot, and he wants it to be shorter. And really, in his mind, it's just a user experience issue. But he's trying to convince the BIOS guys to make it shorter, and they're like, we can't. It's as short as possible. And he was like, listen, if you cut off 5 seconds from the boot time, we're going to sell 100 million of these things. That's going to save mankind like millions of man hours of time.
Yeah.
And they, you know, they tell it now, of course. And of course they did, and they did shorten it. They managed to shorten it because maybe they didn't believe that, but maybe they just got in the going, yeah, you know what, you're right. It is worth doing, that kind of thing. So worth doing is one of the ways you get people involved. So, okay, do we have any online questions? Or, no, okay.
How can someone who's starting out at the bottom of the ladder prepare themselves to be a better leader when the time comes?
Oh my God, I did a whole talk on this like 2 years ago. It's called Everyday Leadership. What did I say?
The link is up top here. Click that.
Yeah, I did a talk at Full Sail on it that you can check. It's exactly on that subject. It is things that you can do now to start preparing for a future in leadership. I'm not going to do the whole thing.
I'll give you
I'll
give you the spark notes, right? So the first one is read. I think reading and watching videos about leadership of great leaders, John Maxwell, Simon Sinek, those guys.
Get interested in the idea of leadership beyond your technical.
Start thinking of leadership as craft as well, and then just seek out opportunities within your work. To lead small groups, right? And express that interest to a boss. I wouldn't say like you start and you're like, oh, it's my first day. Just so you know, boss, I want to lead, right? That's not quite there. But you come in, you prove your worth. And this is almost exactly what happened to me. I came in, I worked for a year. My boss came by and said something to me once. And I said, oh, you know, I think I'm a pretty good game designer. I just haven't had the chance to do it. And he's like, okay. And the creative director came over and was like, I hear you want to do game design. And I pitched this stupid idea to him. He laughed really hard, walked away, came back 20 minutes later and was like, hey, can you take over this whole project? And I was like, what? Okay, cool. And so, you know, expressing that and following, you know, the leaders that you respect at your company, asking them, hey, this is something I still do today. Can I buy you lunch and just ask you some questions? Right? Like everybody likes free lunch, right? I could go to Gary Jones and say, hey, Gary, can I buy you lunch? Like that dude, he doesn't need me to pay for his lunch, but he's like, yeah, free lunch, let's do it, right? And so asking leaders that you respect to spend a little bit of time. So yeah, I love what you said, right? Let's start thinking about leadership as craft on top of the work that you're doing and start to study it.
That talk is on YouTube somewhere. It's called Everyday Leadership. And I'm not saying that it's right. I'm just saying that
that's your answer.
I did 50 minutes on it.
I thought it was good. I watched it.
You did? Okay, that's good.
Question from one of our online viewers. I think a couple of you said you were recovering narcissists. So
just me.
How do you advise?
I'm not recovering.
How do you advise a subordinate to approach their leader when they disagree with a poor decision that has been made?
I tend to start by asking questions. I want to understand. I think that incompetence is misdiagnosed. I think a lot of the times is what I ultimately want and this happens with Ted. If Ted does something, a lot of times I'll just ask, can you walk me through your thinking on this?
Yeah.
And I'd say that like 50% of the time or more, I'm like, oh. A lot of the things that we identify, that's stupid, that's crazy, like why are they doing that? When you understand, now, it is incumbent on us as leaders, as Grant said earlier, we have to share the why. We need to walk people on that journey, and Ted's great about doing that, but realistically speaking, that is the most effective way.
Yep.
Trying to, and maybe in the course of asking that, they will realize, oh, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. And then you could say, hey, well, what if we did this? And then you get to the same result. You probably have to do that with design stuff like.
It's all the time. The thing you have to keep in mind is I think every person who makes a decision needs the benefit of the doubt, right? Because they made a decision based on the information they had, right? And when you are presented with a decision that you don't agree with, there's a chance that you're in the minority of that, right? Like maybe it's a good decision for everyone else around you, but it's impacting you a little bit harder, and so you are having that reaction to that. So finding out that information and knowing like, why was this decision made, that is always a perfectly reasonable thing to ask. There's a difference between questioning someone's decision-making and asking how they arrived at a decision. So it's really about you just coming in as like, I'm seeking information on this so I can better understand. And like you said, sometimes that conversation can help them understand that their decision was not the best for everything, even though the information they had at the time made it seem like it was the right thing to do.
I would add to that kind of engagement is also a path to management.
Yeah.
So if I'm managing somebody and the group has to do a thing and somebody does this, it sticks in my mind that, well, they wanted to know more about what happened, and it's going to bubble up that like, oh, that guy's naturally digging into the side of the leadership. I'm starting to see some leadership skills. You're actually eliciting by asking about that problem.
Yeah, and what you can't do is you can't come and say, this is wrong, this is a problem, and then I'm out, right? You have to be solution-oriented. So you can come and ask these questions and say, hey, I'm a little bit concerned about this, and maybe here's a solution. Jonathan Haidt is a great writer and social psychologist, and he wrote a book called The Righteous Mind. And in The Righteous Mind, he says, you cannot convince someone to disbelieve something they believe. And he then spends 200 pages explaining how you get someone to disbelieve something that they believe. And the way that you do it is to approach the conversation with trying to understand why someone believes what they believe. And he's talking about bigger things than game development and believing that they believe it to be true, right? And so, if I came to Shaun here and he told me, oh, we're gonna make all the enemies in the game yellow, and I'm like, but colorblind, blah, whatever. I come to him and I say, Shaun, why are you so, why is that so important to you? Why is it important that the enemies are yellow? And he starts to explain it to me. And if I'm immediately thinking, yeah, fuck you, man, you're going to do it this way, we're going to do this, I'm going to change you this, and I'm going to get him into like a logical trap and prove him wrong, then there's no value. So I actively listen, I understand what he's saying, and then I ask again, why? Why are we doing that? Okay, thank you for explaining that to me. Here's my solution-oriented thought on maybe how we should improve that, right? So you're not just coming and saying, you're incompetent, you're doing this wrong, screw you, but you're trying to understand why they're making the decision, understand that they're doing it for the best of intentions probably, and that maybe they just don't fully understand the full scale of everything else going on, and maybe you have some insights to that.
There's a kind of like pithy way, schmaltzy way to remember, but I think it's the why, who, what, how is the order you want to go in.
Always why.
You never start with the what, challenging the rut. You start with like the fundamental values, the people involved, the goal, the strategy. A lot of the times when you do that, when you go through that order with problem solving or with trying to offer feedback or whatever, it's 5,000 times more effective.
Correct. It changes it from being adversarial to being like a cooperative exchange,
Correct.
and to where it's more of a conversation. Yeah, so. All right, we are out of time, and we have some hard exits for some people here. So how about it, guys? Round of applause for our awesome panel.
This is the time. I don't